One of the more difficult concepts for a beginner to grasp is computed properties. It sounds like a complicated feature, but luckily it's like a light switch. Once you learn it, then you pretty much know it forever. It's not as difficult as you may imagine. Before we jump into the code, I want to define the word compute. I know some of you are not native English speakers, so you should understand what this phrase means before moving forward. Put simply, compute means to calculate something. This can be any sort of calculation from basic math to concatenating strings to form a full word, phrase, or sentence. Anytime you have to perform calculations on a value or multiple values, you are performing a computation. Combining this with the word properties gives clarity as to what this means. Computed properties are properties that are calculated in some sort of manner. Alright, just keep that in the back of your mind as we discuss how and what computed properties are in relation to view. If we were to look at our view instance, would you be able to tell which bit of code would be considered a computed property? If you guessed the full name method, you would be correct. The full name method calculates the full name by combining the first, middle, and last names in the data object. The full name method works better as a computed property. It may not seem like it, but using a method for this sort of situation is costly and inefficient. Let's explore why that is. This method currently works fine. We don't get errors in the console, nor does it give the rest of our application a problem. However, something is going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing. Let's switch back to the editor. Right before I return the value, I'm going to log a message with the console.log function. The message will say the following: full name method was called. I'm going to comment out the message inside the update last name method so that we don't see it in the console. We want to shift our focus to computed properties. Let's check out our app. Make sure you have the console opened. I'm going to update the first name input field. After inputting a value, the full name is updated. Inside the console, the message inside the full name method was logged. That's to be expected since the first name data property was updated. Therefore, the full name method would have to be called again for the latest changes. Now let's see what happens if I were to click on the increment or decrement buttons. Not only does the age get updated, but the full name method gets called again. This happens regardless if we updated the properties for the name. This is the first problem with using a method for calculating a property. Whenever any of the data properties are updated, View will render the template again onto the page. This means that any methods in the template are recalled during the process. To be more precise, this applies to methods that are invoked immediately. We do have methods that are called when an event occurs. We don't have to worry about them being called on every render. The full name method is an example of a method called when we don't want it to. It's more desirable for it to be called only when it's necessary. That's possible thanks to computed properties. Let's learn how to use them. Switch back to the editor. Inside the view instance, we're going to create another property in our object called computed. It'll be on the same level as the data and methods objects. The value is an object. Inside this object, we can define anything we want. I want to convert the full name method into a computed property. Converting this is as simple as moving the method into the computed object. I'm going to change the message inside to say the following: full name computed property was called. There's one last adjustment we'll need to make. Inside the template, we have to remove the parentheses from the expression. This may seem strange, but Vue treats your computed properties as data. I'll explain more in a moment, but let's check if this works. Let's view the application in the browser. Everything will work normally. If I update the first name, then the full name updates too. The message we logged in the function appears in the console. However, this time, if I were to update the age, the message doesn't get logged. This means that the function doesn't get called even when the age is updated. There is a benefit to using computed properties. View will cache the values of computed properties. Let's discuss what happens when a data property is updated. First, it'll scan the function of the computed property. It'll check what data properties you're using inside the function. If any of those values change, View will rerun the function and update the value. If a data property was updated that wasn't used inside the function, View will not bother updating the value. Therefore, we save on performance and execution time. View is smart enough to know when to call the function based on the data used inside the function, even if it isn't actively used. Let me show you what I mean. Back inside the full name function, I'm going to add this.age. I'm not going to bother doing anything with the value. I won't reset or change it. Normally, we wouldn't do something like this. This is just an example. Once you have that set, refresh the page one more time and update the first name. The message is logged in the console. Now I'm going to update the age. This time the message does get logged. It's because we're using the age data property in the method. View was able to pick up on that. Since the age gets updated, then the function gets called. I'm going to remove the age from the function because it's unnecessary to have it there. I want to talk a little more about how computed properties are used in terms of how we write it. The first question is, are computed properties data or methods? The answer is a combination of both. The data property is used to store single values. You can store objects and arrays as well. It's not the kind of object where you would store functions. If you want to store functions, you would use the methods property. If you have a function that calculates a value, you would use a computed property. Let's discuss the differences between methods and computed properties for a moment. With methods, you are allowed to calculate values. We can use them in expressions if we want to. In fact, you could use methods exclusively. However, you would lose out on the performance gain that computed properties provide. Methods provide a lot of flexibility. You can make requests, update elements, etc. With computed properties, they serve one purpose, or at least they should, and that is to calculate a value. Unlike methods, you are always expected to return a value. You're free to take other actions, but you must always return a value. This is because the value is what's stored in View. We can even inspect this. Back inside the browser, I'm going to switch to the View developer tools. Clicking on the root element will show me the data inside my application. A new category will appear called Computed. The full name will be set to the computed value. View is storing the value, not the function. That doesn't mean the function is lost forever. It's stored elsewhere. Whenever the value needs to be updated, the function for the computed property is called. This is why we don't add the parentheses in our expressions. It's because we're retrieving the value, not calling the function. The function is called internally by View automatically. Another thing you need to be aware of is that you cannot pass data onto the function. If you need to pass on data, then you may want to consider using a method. That does it for computed properties. There's a lot of magic happening behind the scenes to make computed properties work. Using computed properties is simple thanks to that magic. Computed properties can seriously boost the performance of your application with little work. I recommend you play around with them more before moving on to the next lecture. In the resource section, I provide a link to more information about computed properties. I definitely recommend giving it a good read.